Welcome to the English Wine Collection's Wine Talks British Business podcast. My name's Guy, and this episode features Brad Greatrix, who is married to Cherrie Spriggs, and together they are the impressive duo who make and produce the award-winning English sparkling wines at Nyetimber. Brad and Cherrie both have a background in studying science at university. After trying a bottle of Nyetimber by chance one evening whilst at Brad's parents' home, both Brad and Cherrie felt inspired by the English sparkling wine, and so they sent an email to the owner of Nyetimber to find out more. Less than 2 weeks later, they had their first day of work at Nyetimber, and the rest, as they say, is history. Brad, welcome to the English Wine Collection's Wine Talks. Thank you for being a part of this episode. Could you start by giving us a rundown on your career, how you got into wine to where we are today?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. To arrive at Nyetimber today has been a bit of a journey for myself and for my wife Cherrie Spriggs, who works alongside me. We actually met many years ago, almost 20 years ago now, as biochemistry undergraduate students back in Canada. No idea at the time that we would end up working in wine. We were just keen science students, but privately developing an interest in wine, and we have my parents to thank for that. Actually, they used to have this lovely tradition on Friday evenings to open a special bottle of wine, take the phone off the hook, back when that used to mean something. Nowadays, of course, we can all be reached even when you do that, but they used to take the phone off the hook and open something nice and enjoy the wine, and if I happened to be around, I'd get a chance to taste the wine with them, and so I developed an interest, and I brought Cherrie into it, and she had the same passion. So we were working through our studies, but privately interested in wine. And then the next key moment for us, I suppose, was after graduating. I took an internship in Switzerland. I was working for a pharmaceutical company actually for a few months, and Cherrie came over to visit me, and we took some time off, and we traveled to France and traveled to Burgundy, and we were visiting the vineyards. Sure. And it turned out to be harvest time, so we were going and seeing these producers and looking in the fermenters and tasting the grapes and all seeing how production was going. And Cherrie said, wouldn't it be amazing if we could do this one day? And at the time, I think we both considered it sort of a fleeting comment, not something serious, but that really planted a seed for us.
So would you say it was almost off the cuff question from her, because you're there in the moment? You're like, oh, Brad, what if we did this?
Exactly. So,
really? Okay.
So we were thinking, we were planning to return to Canada for graduate studies, to go on and do a master's degree, and the actual comment that Cherrie made was something along the lines of, wouldn't it be great if we could do a PhD in wine rather than biochemistry? And at that time we had no awareness that such a thing existed. Now, when we got back to Canada, as it turned out, it does. One of the universities that we were looking at was the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and they have a wine research center there.
Right.
And Cherrie and I ended up enrolling as students, earned a master's degree there, but that was us wearing white lab coats, working on 1 liter fermentations of wines, and very interesting studies. But we'd go to conferences to present our work, and it'd be winemakers in attendance, and find that the people that were interacting with us and listening to us talk about our research were other white coats in the front of the audience, asking about this graph or that study, and the winemakers were at the back of the room with their eyes rolling back in their head, saying, oh, when are you going to tell me something really practical that I can take away and use in my cellar? And it was those people that Cherrie and I could most relate to and were most interested in talking to. So we realized that this wine research studies weren't enough, and shifted gears and moved ourselves to Australia, where we could do proper practical enology training at the University of Adelaide.
And you, so it was a question of just you wanted to get involved. It wasn't just the science.
Exactly. So although we loved the science and the process, and now looking back in hindsight, it gave us a tremendous foundation for what we do. At the time, we were really the part that we were most passionate about was getting out into the vineyards, getting into the winery, getting our hands dirty, and really, getting involved on the production side.
And how does, you touched on it briefly, but how did that lead to being at Nyetimber and wanting to take this on?
So this is where, interestingly, this is where Cherrie's parents come into the story. So after we graduated from Adelaide University, we'd felt, okay, we've covered the academic side of winemaking, but there's two bits. There's a science to winemaking, but there's also an artistry, and so we need to get some experience with the more sensory experience, tasting wine, etc. So we embarked on this self-imposed internship around the world, working for top winemakers. Happy to do any sort of routine jobs that they asked of us in order that we.
So how did you get in with them though? Because I imagine it's not that easy.
Well, fortunately, once a year, every winery in the world, when it comes time to bring grapes in, they have this huge surge of extra work, and so they need extra help.
Okay.
And some of the places that we applied were in high demand, because it wasn't so much for us about going through the motions of cleaning tanks or pumping things over. We wanted the taste experience. Wanted to work for somebody that we could talk to about how do you know when to bring the fruit in, when to move on to this stage, and taste alongside with them. But I think if you're motivated and passionate enough and express your goals clearly, you can get people's attention. And so it was just a matter of asking.
Do you think, as you say, touching on one of the questions there, like at what point do I bring the grapes in? I presume there's not a specific at this moment. It's very much try the grape. You've got to understand the terroir and so on, etc.
Yeah. So that's really, I think, a unique. No, I won't say unique. That's way overstating it. But that's an approach that Cherrie and I bring. That's maybe different from a lot of people. That you could break winemaking down into very technical steps and measure the sugar and measure the acidity and say this is the day that we picked because this is what the lab tells me. But really, at the end of the day, thinking about someone opening a bottle of your wine, sharing it at the table, they most of the time don't care what the acidity is or what this or that technical parameter. Yeah. Is it delicious? Does it go with my food? Do my friends enjoy it? Do my family enjoy it? And so we put taste at the center of all of our decisions, including when the grapes come in. And that's where, putting in the hours in our early formative years to learn that side of wine production, I think really paid off for us.
I think something you touched on then I was actually going to bring up a bit later, but was the 1086, because that's been key to, you found a very specific parcel of land within the vineyard, but the quality was just outstanding, and so you separated that. And following on from what you've said, you're very much out there in the vineyard trying the grapes.
Yeah, that's right. So 1086 is the name of a prestige cuvée. In fact, we have two. We have a white 1086 and a rosé 1086 cuvée that we first bottled from the 2009 harvest. Now, many people consider it. They talk about 1086 as something new, and it is new in terms of presentation to the market. We only just launched it last September 2018. But it was first conceived in the harvest of 2009. Now, Cherrie and I spend a lot of time leading up to the harvest in the vineyard, tasting grapes and deciding when things might come in and in what order they might come in, and realized that amongst the harvest, very high quality harvest, we've got some really exceptional parcels here that taste good as grapes. So we kept them separate, and the juice tasted good, so we turned it into wine, and the wine tasted good, and it was just clear to us, to the team, to the owner of Nyetimber, Eric Harima, that we've got something special here, and we decided together to bottle 1086 as a special cuvee for us.
Do you think, was that ever an idea or a thought in your mind that there may be a specific parcel of land here that we could make something as good as that?
Yes, I think absolutely. I think from the very beginning, I mentioned Sherry's parents, but I didn't get a chance to fully tell the story. But if I loop back to that, I think sure. I can explain a little bit more, including onto 1086. That Sherry and I arrived at Nyetimber, having done this self-imposed internship, as I mentioned. We arrived here because of tasting a bottle of Nyetimber. Now, we were living in Canada at the time. Sherry's father was born in Cambridge, and her parents regularly visited the UK even before we came over here. And on one of their trips, they brought back a bottle of Nyetimber for us as a souvenir of their trip, knowing Sherry and Brad are interested in wine. Won't they find this English wine interesting? We tasted this wine, and we tasted this wine, and really underestimated how good it would be. We could clearly see there was some amazing potential for sparkling wine in England. And it was the first time that we tasted wine that had that little spark, no pun intended, but that you normally only see in that sure. that famous sparkling wine region across the channel. So we got in touch with Nyetimber in the most basic way possible. We sent an email to info@nyetimber.com and saying we're two winemakers. We've tried your wine. We think it's really exciting. But how big is the industry? Is there room for two of us to come over and get involved in this exciting English sparkling wine venture? And this email was passed to Eric Harima, the man that owns Nyetimber, and he's our CEO. And he asked for us, from reading that email, he asked for us to send our CVs. We did. We had a couple of phone calls, and less than 2 weeks from that first shot in the dark email was our first day at work at Nyetimber. Believe it or not, this was just over 12 years ago now. But how we hit it off and we bonded with Mr. Harima was over this passion for wanting to do something special, and also the realization that Nyetimber could produce something really exceptional of the vineyards that we have. Now, it's not well known, but Nyetimber, the wines were at the time a little bit of a fixer-upper. So these conversations that we were having with Mr. Harima and Sherry and I about how the incredible potential that we have here was really exciting, but entirely a speculative thing at the time. But
hadn't quite achieved it, as it were.
Exactly. The wines were great. We were all there, including Mr. Harima, from having tasted a bottle of Nyetimber. So there was the quality was there, but let's say some unfulfilled potential, like a rough cut diamond, really. Sure. And as we got in and we started working together and started having experience and tasting what the vineyards were providing us and the early base wine, we realized, hang on, we have the chance to do something really special here, and those discussions were the first seed of 1086 and how 1086 came about.
Did you imagine that you just, because you do a sparkling rosé as well, I think, of the 1086?
That's right. Yeah.
So did you ever imagine that you'd do that as well, or you just stick to the sparkling wine?
Yeah. We did have the idea.
Okay.
So when Sherry and I joined in 2007, sparkling rosé is something that we're very passionate about, along with Eric Harima. So we decided from the 2007 harvest that we would bottle a sparkling rosé for Nyetimber. So at the time, the portfolio was quite simple. Classic Cuvée and Blanc de Blanc, roughly in equal proportions. So we have a blended, Classic Cuvée, our blended sparkling wine, and then Blanc de Blanc, 100% from Chardonnay. And we decided to add that harvest a sparkling rosé, and we produced a vintage rosé for the first for 3 years, and each year the quality better than the last, and we realized that the potential is there also for a really high level vintage rosé.
I think that leads quite well to my next question. I think it was last year, so Cherrie Spriggs, and obviously yourself, you were awarded the Winemaker of the Year at the International Wine Challenge. That must have been quite an achievement and a real good, gold seal, if you like, for you both. I mean, what did that mean?
It was a stunning occasion, and I'm so happy for Cherrie and so proud for Cherrie, because the International Wine Challenge, one of the most prestigious wine competitions in the world. It's even in the name international. So we're talking about worldwide wines being entered into this competition. And the award that was presented to Cherrie was as the best sparkling winemaker from all of the entries that they receive, including from France. This was the first time in the history of the competition, so 30 plus years, that the award had gone to a winemaker from outside of Champagne, and Cherrie was also the first female ever to win the award. So just a spectacular accomplishment. But if you know Cherrie, you realize it's not so surprising that she's the one to just casually smash through this barrier and accomplish something special. So I'm so proud of her, and she's such a naturally talented winemaker. Her instincts with things around taste and flavor and growing and getting the most out of things, I don't know anyone better than that. So absolutely wholly deserved. But I think also what's really satisfying, and Cherrie will be the first to say this, is what it means overall for Nyetimber.
Sure.
It really is a team effort. We considering Eric Karima is the one who sets the bar right from the very beginning, set the bar very high for us in terms of what he believes Nyetimber can accomplish, and what he wants Nyetimber to accomplish. So we have this environment where we can thrive, but also right through the whole team. As talented as Cherrie is, if she doesn't have people on the team out in the vineyards looking after the vines, taking care with important decisions like pruning, shoot positioning, then the quality of the fruit's going to suffer. And as good as she is, she's not going to be able to produce those really top wines. So Cherrie's the one that gets to raise the trophy, but it really means something for all of Nyetimber, this award.
And it sounds like it's the communication between you all that's key there, as you say, to be able to interact and say this is what this grape's like, and so on.
Yeah, it's a real advantage for Nyetimber, and a deliberate choice by us that Nyetimber wines are only ever produced from estate-grown fruit. So all of our wines are produced from vineyards that we own, and that means we have full integration of the production process. So our vineyard team is working closely with the winery team to achieve the best from all of the parcels that we have. That's not to say that you can't make great wine by purchasing grapes. There's thousands of examples that would prove me wrong on that, but inevitably, when there is a cash transaction at the end of the growing season, there are two people who have opposing interests, and I think that full integration that we have at Nyetimber is a great advantage for us, and that's why, despite it being requiring an investment and a lot of extra work, we're committed to making wine just from vineyards that we own.
So you touched on it a little bit there, but I'm curious about the dynamic between you and Cherrie. How does it work? One ideas, one practical, because you mentioned obviously Cherrie's out there in the vineyard.
Yeah. So on paper, Cherrie is the head winemaker, head of production, you could say. So the way we're structured is we have a viticulturist, Ben Kanzler, who is responsible for all things vineyard related, and then I am responsible for all things wine production related, and Ben and I report to Cherrie. So she has overall oversight and overall control of all the things that lead into producing the wine. But Cherrie and I have worked together more than not in our careers, and I think the reason that it works so well in the current relationship is just naturally the way she thinks is she's long-term planner. A way that I simplify it is to say that Cherrie deals with what's coming up tomorrow, and I deal with executing what's going on today. So Cherrie sets the plans, I take the plans with our team and get them done.
As you say, it is very much a joint effort. It's the group, it's the collective, everybody coming together and pitching in to create the wine.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a nice advantage for us and for Nyetimber, being married and working so closely together is we've gotten to know each other's palates and how we approach the wines, and we can use that to get the best for our wines. In a normal situation, considering Cherrie's my boss, I might be, were we not married, I might be trying to steal her job, or she might be trying to hold me back, and there'd be a little bit of politics and confrontation there. But since all of that is swept away, we can really work together in the best possible way. And when we're making these tasting decisions on blending, on dosage, on grapes, how the juice is tasting. There are things, tasting is a subjective exercise. There are things that I'm naturally stronger at. There's things that she's naturally stronger at, and we can defer to each other to get the best from both of us. It's not a case of Cherrie's the boss, so she's always right, or vice versa, but rather, Brad, you take the lead on this, and I'll take, I'll cover that, and I think we end up at a better result because of that collaboration.
I think, as you say, it's key. You both know each other's strengths, and then how to balance that out and move things forward. So, touching on that, one of the things I was going to bring up was that it does come across in everything Nyetimber does, and especially you two as individuals, that you are perfectionists and that you are pursuing that through your wines. Do you think you've come close to that yet with any of the wines you've produced, or do you think it's possible? For you,
is it possible? I think yes and no.
Of course.
So on the yes sense, to produce something perfect. Winemaking, if you consider it's just a series of decisions along the way when something comes in, and what yeast to use, what temperature, fermentation, how to put the blend together, etc. So it's a series of decisions, and so theoretically it would be possible to get all of those exactly right, all of the 1,000 decisions exactly right, and produce something sensational. But in practical terms, no, it's not possible to produce a perfect wine, and particularly with sparkling. I think that's because it takes so long to get the feedback. So on did we get the harvest date right, or is the blend as good as it could be? Well, it's when the wine has been processed and disgorged and aged and released and on the market, and you're tasting it 15 years later, you can say, yep, that's just about right, or no, I wish I'd done this differently. And in the interval, of course, you've made other wines, and so you just run out of road. You just run out of time as a winemaker to optimize all those decisions. But by doing things as carefully as we can, and using taste all the way through the process, give ourselves as much feedback as we can. I think we do the best job possible. But as far as, have we produced anything perfect or near perfect? No, I think the best is yet to come for Nyetimber.
I think the point that you've raised is very valuable, and it is a constantly evolving process. We have different weather every year, and obviously even within the individual seasons, you can have such huge differences, and that will always affect the wine. So one of the things I wanted to touch on you, Brad, is I'm going to quote you here, so let me make sure I get this right, it follows on well, is that you're passionate about producing exceptional wines from exceptional vineyards. Obviously, I presume Nyetimber falls in within that, but what does that mean to you? I mean, why have you used that as a quote?
I think Cherrie and I are both driven to do something special, to do whatever it takes, to put in the extra work to produce something special. But that can't happen without having special vineyards. It's just the old silk purse sow's ear expression that you have to have great fruit in order to make great wine. So as hard as we work, as careful as we are to try and do something special, we're completely blocked from doing something special if we haven't got great vineyards. And the Nyetimber advantage again is this idea that we own all of our own vineyards, and it's not just one rectangular field in the middle of West Sussex. Actually, from our overall hectarage, 260 hectares now, that's divided into 9 vineyards that are spread out across 3 counties even. So we have vineyards in Hampshire, we have vineyards in West Sussex where we started, and now recently planted vineyards in Kent. And the reason we've gone as far spread out in that way is to get exactly the right soil conditions, exactly the right weather conditions and local geography to provide shelter for the vines from wind, from prevailing weather. So effectively, all of our vineyards, you could say, we don't have such a classification in England, but all of our vineyards are of a Grand Cru status because We've gone out and chosen just exactly the conditions. So we've tried our best to put vines in places that have the potential to produce something really, really special.
In a way, it's I think it's important because, as you say, we don't in England have such vast areas like Central Europe does, where they can then have the different distinctions between the wines and then the individual regions. Do you think that in England we ever might go down that road, that you might have individual regions, or do you think we're too small for that?
That's a good question. I would never say never to that. But coming back to my point about how long it takes to get feedback, I think with sparkling wines, I think we're still at the stage of learning and developing, and there are some movements to create an appellation type system in England. Sure. But I think it's tricky to define exactly the boundaries in a way that's meaningful to wine style. And for us at Nyetimber, we've taken the decision to really focus on quality first. That's not. Sorry, I should clarify. That's not to say that the appellation system isn't focusing on quality, but what I mean is, in order to produce the best possible wine, we think that the vineyards that we have in Hampshire and in Kent and in West Sussex are all important to us. And so we're not interested in making a special distinction of this is a West Sussex wine and this is a Hampshire wine. It's rather, can we use grapes, wine from each of those sites to produce something really, really special.
Perfect blend, as it were.
Exactly, yeah.
So why do you think that English wine is now doing so well? On the world scene, we are gaining recognition and people are paying attention. Prime example, as you mentioned earlier, is Cherrie won Winemaker of the Year.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you think that's coming about now?
I think there's a few things. First of all, the wines deserve it. So English sparkling wines from one year to the next, getting better and better, and we have an annual trade tasting put on by Wine GB, our trade association for the wine trade in London, and everyone brings their wines to show them off, and it's a great chance to taste overall what the industry is doing, and from one year to the next, tremendous leaps in quality. So I think the wines are really highly regarded. I think also England has a great advantage in that some of the best renowned wine media is based out of London. So we have the opportunity that a lot of other places wouldn't have to put our wines in front of really world-class journalists, for example, sure, at these trade tastings. So I think if you look at, the quality of the wines are increasing, but also we punch above our weight in terms of media coverage, probably partly related to this proximity factor that the top journalists are based in the UK, and so we have a chance to see them.
I think we do well with that, as you say, its location. I think also being so close to London, which was such an international draw on many different talents, and that filters in.
Yeah, excellent point. Actually, you have to say, London is number one or top three wine cities in the world, and here it is, just around the corner from most English producers.
You've touched on a few topics of what you believe makes Nyetimber different, and within what you do, is there anything else that you think you could comment on that this is something that Cherrie and I do that we really think is unique to Nyetimber?
I think I've been asked this a few times in different guises, and each time I think about it, there isn't really a secret formula that we have, or a magic bullet or anything to produce the wines that we do. I think probably what separates Nyetimber maybe is just the fact that we we recognize, I suppose, first of all the decisions that go into producing a bottle of wine, and probably there's some variables that we haven't even thought about yet. But what we're trying to do is go through the process, and each time we're at a decision that might influence the ultimate wine quality, is to stop and think about it, and what are we doing here? What are we trying to accomplish? And what's the best way forward? And I think building up all the experience over the years, I think one of the really satisfying things, looking back, is when we have conversations with people, and they say, well, why do you do this and why do you do that? We have an answer for almost all of those questions. Why do you have that? Why do you have that color of glass? Or why are you using this type of cork? Or why are you have vineyards in these locations? And we have an answer for that because we've thought about it and made decisions about what would be best for the wines, and gone through that way.
And I imagine that's a constantly evolving process. Anyway, you're always learning, because the wine's always different, the seasons are always different.
Absolutely, that makes things a little bit challenging.
Yeah.
That from one year to the next, the seasons are so different. So I already mentioned, the challenge of being a winemaker is that you don't have a lot of time in your career. One harvest per year, so maybe 35 opportunities to make wine over the course of a career, and so it's a case of having all the diverse growing seasons to provide a challenge, but then also just not having that many occasions to work on it.
So on that note, where do you think the industry's going? Because you see, there's a lot at play here. Where do you guys position Nyetimber and the English wine industry as a whole?
I think a really important next step for all of us collectively is export. I think we've done really well in the UK. Still more work to do. Still a bit of an uphill battle in certain segments to convince people to focus on English sparkling wine compared to some other wine styles. But export is the next big thing. No question, selling English sparkling wine in the UK, there's some parochial support, and you travel outside these borders, and we don't have the same benefits. So I think we need to go back to some of the messages that we were talking about in London 10 years ago, just in terms of a basic introduction to English sparkling wine, and make that case overseas. And I think we've got the wines, and actually a really important development lately is the brands as well. So you've got, you know, the look and feel of proper brands from several English producers. So we look the part, and sommeliers and retailers can feel confident having these, you know, high quality products on their shelves overseas.
Do you think it is being well received? Because you touched on it a little bit there, and it is still quite new.
Yeah. From
your experience, what are the feedback there?
I think the wines are being very well received. It's a question of getting people to taste them. So where there are barriers, you know, people who are still afraid of English wine because they've been scarred in the past, or they just picture you know a country where, you know, it rains all the time. If you never visit, that might be the stereotype impression of here, but actually we have an amazing climate for sparkling wines, and the wines do really well. So we can get people to taste it, to taste the wines. That's an easier way to convince them, but of course it's not possible. There just isn't enough people to take the bottles around, and there isn't enough stock to go and do these tastings. So we've got to work on the reputation, word of mouth, so that people are interested to try the wines before.
I think it's definitely happening. And touching on what you said, I know recently I sent a completely mixed case to someone in France who's doing a tasting just on English wines, 12 different sparklings, for that very reason. So I think we're there, it's getting known, it's just really about, you know, pushing it up and getting on the world scene. And obviously, as we touched on earlier with what Cherrie did, winning Winemaker, etc., these are all great ways for the industry to move forward.
Exactly, yeah.
So if we touch on what you and Cherrie like to do outside of just winemaking. I know you guys are big outdoors fans in general. How do you guys relax?
We do like to spend our times outdoors. We're both really keen gardeners, and I think that ties into also our love of food, which ties in really well with our love of wine. That we do like to spend a lot of time outside when we can. Growing different produce, a few flowers in the garden, but most things are edible, fruit and vegetables. We love to we just enjoy being active. So we love to run, we love to swim. In the winter time, I'll spend as much time as I can with Cherrie on ski slopes.
Yes, you were out not long ago, weren't you? I remember.
Cherrie. When we first met, Cherrie wasn't as interested in skiing as I was, and then of course we lived in Australia for a time, and we lived in England, not classic alpine skiing country, so it sort of fell off the radar. But she, I don't know what the trigger was, but she picked up the interest in skiing, and I used to race when I was younger. So as soon as she mentioned the word, I took advantage of the opportunity, and we went out and we have continued ever since.
Where did you race?
So I grew up in Ontario in Canada.
Yeah.
And so the resort was Snow Valley, but for people who are used to skiing in Europe, if you approached Snow Valley by car, you'd be forgiven for looking straight over the top of the hill. It's only about sort of 100 and 150 meters of vertical, so a tiny slope, but I had the advantage that it was just around the corner from my house, and so I could ski even after school. When I was growing up, I could pop over and do a couple of hours skiing. So a few winters that I was keeping track, I was able to get on the slopes 100 days a year sometimes.
Oh wow! Oh, I'm jealous. I'm really jealous.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great way to unwind.
Yeah.
Wow. So touching on that, Brad, has there... Obviously, you've got the balance. It sounds like you've really got it sussed in terms of when you're focused on winemaking and taking the time out. This it's quite a broad question for me to ask, but has there been a wine that really just caught your attention and took your breath away, as it were? You're like, wow.
Really, the most memorable wine, I would say, in our formative years was when we were at the Wine Research Center as students at the University of British Columbia. And we had the opportunity to taste some wines that were part of this aging study that was running at the university. So people could were donating wines into the wine library from their collection, and we were running an analysis project on how these wines were evolving in terms of the sensory compounds and some of the chemical measurements, acidity, etc. But to do these analyses requires about 50 milliliters of wine, and so you've got 700 milliliters left over from the bottle. And so our research supervisor was a man very passionate about wine, Dr. Henny Van Buren, and he used to take these wines with the students and allow us to taste. And on one occasion, we got to try 1961 Lafite. And wow. This was very early in our wine careers, and a chance to taste. 61 is not the most famous vintage, but from Bordeaux. But to try a wine like that with 40 years of bottle age at such a formative time in our career really set the bar quite high for us, and allowed us to realize what's possible in wine. So that's a really memorable wine for both Cherrie and I.
Can you recall what it was about that particular wine?
Just the fact that it still had a freshness and a vitality, tremendous complexity from having aged so long in the bottle, but it wasn't just about these mature caramely or deep flavors. There was a freshness. Exactly, a wine that's so old and yet still very much alive, and you realize the importance of balance and complexity in a wine. I think you can't achieve that from going to the supermarket or going to the shop and only tasting really young wines. To be able to try wines with such maturity early on, I think gave us an advantage as young winemakers.
It sounds wonderful. Where do you see the English wine the English wine scene going? I know we touched a little bit on that earlier, your plans, but as the industry as a whole, what do you think would be a good place to position ourselves?
I think we have done a lot of work to have a reputation for quality for English sparkling wines and consistency. So I really think we need to consolidate that and push forward on that. I think it's a trap that a few other regions have fallen into, that you get a little bit of success and maybe spread yourself too thin or sacrifice quality in order to increase volume, and then it drags everyone's prices down, and you never really fully recover from that. So I'd like to see us dig our heels in and commit to staying really on this quality premium focus in the sparkling wines, but also in the still wines that we produce in this country. And I'd also like to hopefully have us retain some focus on the varieties that we're already growing and producing. English wine itself is a fairly new thing. I think it's tempting for people to ask, what have you got that's new? What are you trying that's new? What else is coming? But if you look at successful regions anywhere else in the world, there's a degree of focus and specialization that makes them successful. Northern Rhone aren't coming up with all sort of different grape varieties and wine styles from one year to the next. They have something they're really successful with, and they stick to that. And I'd like to see English wine have the confidence to, with the few quality wine styles that we're producing, let's stick with that. Let's make them better. Let's really get ourselves known for these wines and develop that critical mass for what we're good at.
As you say, it's about maintaining the reputation.
Yeah.
We've achieved it, but it's got to continue that forward now.
Yeah, my original plan with Cherrie, as we were training to be winemakers, was to go back to Canada until we had that fateful tasting of a bottle of Nyetimber.
Yeah.
You'd asked us, one day before that, we would have said, oh yeah, we'll end up, making wine in British Columbia or in Ontario. But a real advantage that we have in England compared to Canada, even though the wine industries are of a similar age, is this specialization.
Sure.
If you go to a cellar door in Canada, it's not unusual to find a producer that's got 6 or 7 white wines and 6 or 7 red wines, plus maybe a fortified and a sparkling. And it's really difficult, just from a marketing perspective, it's really difficult to get any momentum behind that. If you mentioned to me, I'm going to Ontario, what wines should I try? I would have to say, well, you go to this producer and try their Cabernet Franc, and go to that producer and try their Riesling, and go over here. And it's too complicated. What I'd like is for the reverse situation, someone coming to England that their friends are telling them, go to England, you've got to make sure you try. You've got to try the sparkling wines, or you've got to try a Bacchus or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. Brad, what plans do you have for the future, both personally and for Nyetimber? Where are you taking the business?
We've been through such tremendous growth, and as I mentioned at the start of the conversation, it was a really speculative thing when Eric Karima and Cherrie and I started working together. That it's nice on the one hand to see some of the things that we've accomplished in terms of quality, in terms of awareness, in terms of awards, etc. But we're still at the stage where we're growing business. So we've got vineyards that aren't yet fully into production. Sales are growing from one year to the next. So Mr. Harima has made tremendous investment in Nyetimber, and we haven't been able to pay him back yet, so to speak. We're not a break even business. He's still making investments from one year to the next. So I really want to see that point when we reach the steady state, where we're producing wine at a certain level and selling wine at a level that can match, so that we achieve. One of the goals of Nyetimber is to become a sustainable business in terms of longevity. It's a tremendous commitment that Mr. Harima has made. He's owned Nyetimber since 2006, so we're 13 years now. The fact that he's still paying into the business shows you how committed he is. But I really want to. It's really important to me that we can get Nyetimber to a state where it's running itself, funding itself. Yeah.
I think that sounds incredible. It's great you've got the support, and that he's obviously giving you and Cherrie a lot of freedom to keep moving forward, and that he's backing you in that sense. It must be very rewarding.
Well, he's got a great palate. That's how it all started. is he knows his wine. He got into this because he's as passionate about wine as anybody that I know. So while he does trust us as his winemakers, as the experts, if you like, in production, he also knows completely what's good and what's not. So we do have some freedom to develop things and to improve things, but at the end of the day, he's absolutely the one that can judge and will tell us if things have gone well or not. And I think the fact that it's now 12 years that we've been working together, I think we can we can say that it's going well. We've got
It's
a really
working.
good relationship. It's working. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. Brad, thank you so much. Just before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to comment on?
I think no. We've had a great conversation. I really enjoyed that. You've given me this opportunity, and best of luck.
Brilliant, Brad. Thank you so much.